Hey, y'all, welcome back to Mountain Murders Midweek.
I'm Heather.
And I'm Dylan.
How are you, Dylan?
Doing great.
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 You're like Tony the Tiger. You're great.
I'm even more exuberant than Tony ever thought about being.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah, it's true.
I can see that. You're like a tiger in your tight-fitting jeans.
Yes, exactly. And how are you feeling, you old snotty ass?
Well, I'm stuffy,
Yeah.
but I feel a lot better.
Yeah, because I think we had the Rona was kicking our ass.
We had the COVIDs last weekend.
Yep.
Absolutely.
Done caught the COVIDs.
My first time.
It
And
was,
it was not gentle. It was not gentle.
Yeah, it was your first time, and it was not as romantic as you thought it might be, right?
It was terrible.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It was just
I'm still recovering. I mean, I'm a lot better. I just have this stuffiness. So apologies for my nasally voice for the duration of the episode.
And honestly, I think there needs to be a discussion about, because I'm not sure you gave consent to COVID to come inside your body. Oh,
I did not.
hey, I mean, to get partner with you.
To
if you will.
ravage me?
Yeah.
I did not.
Kicked your ass.
Yes.
So feeling a little better, and I'm in the same boat. I'm all snottily, and so I apologize as well. But we had to get this. I've got us running late once again, but we're gonna. Heather has something a little bit different for this midweek. Right?
We're in New York, New York.
That's right.
Start spreading the news.
'Cause I'm leaving today.
We've got a lot of ghosts to talk about in haunted New York. Are you
That's
excited?
right. We're going to have some ghost stories up in New York.
Yeah, we're going to talk about some of the most haunted places in New York.
I'm like, why are you so scary?
Boo, bitch.
Boo, bitch. Yeah, let's go. I'm going to do all that the whole time.
You are?
Oh, why are you so scary? Oh, my gosh.
Okay, Dylan. So we have a story. Will you leave your microphone alone,
did
please?
not mean to hit
Stop.
it.
Well, put your hands down.
And I'm glad we have a story. This is really what helps the podcast move along.
Yeah, well, if you'll put your hands down, that will be helpful because you fidget a lot.
Yeah,
and
that's true.
I can't have you hitting the mic the whole time.
Are you going to tell me to sit on my hands like my mama used to do?
Yes, please.
Okay.
Yes.
Yes,
As
ma'am.
Kathy would say, get somewhere and get still.
Yes, ma'am.
Now, Dylan, the story I'm about to tell you is a legend that exists in different variations.
Okay.
Kind of all over the country, all over the United States, there are these types of legends, these types of stories. But this one takes place in Marcellus, New York, where a ghostly apparition of a woman in white,
Oh, wow.
yeah, can be seen searching for her groom along Cedar Vale Road, which is a winding and hazardous road also known as the 13 Curves.
Oh, gosh. That sounds ominous.
She is a bride dressed in white who died during an accident on her wedding night, according to local lore. The common thread in this legend is that the young bride haunts the place of her and her new husband's death after their wedding. Now, one version has it that the couple supposedly crashed in 1954 while driving along the dangerous section of the 13 Curves.
Yeah, it seems like these types of legends always have some tragic story like that. And it seems like there's a reoccurrence of either the woman in red or the woman in white. Do you, maybe?
Well, I've never heard a woman in red.
I've heard at least 12 stories.
You have?
Yeah.
I've never heard of a woman in red.
Maybe I just made that up, but
I
it
think,
sounds cool.
Well, there's the 80s song Lady in Red.
Ah,
I think maybe you're confusing it. I've only ever really heard of the woman in white, Dylan.
okay. Well, thanks for the clarification there. Shit.
You're wrong.
Well, you know what? I'm going to make up a legend about a damn old girl in red.
Whatever.
So,
Ever since, according to the tale, the woman in white can be seen lingering along the road and intercepting unlucky drivers at night. One reporter, a gentleman named Ben Walker, said that the alleged accident happened in 1928, though he admitted he didn't really have any proof to
Right.
verify these claims. So there's like a lot of these themes, kind of this vanishing hitchhiker or this traveler. Then we've got the elements of the lady in white, and we have, it's almost kind of similar to the La Llorona stories that pop up in the American Southwest.
yeah, I saw Blink 182 at La Llorona.
Oh, yeah.
No, nobody.
So 13 curves. And there's even a sign if you travel to this area that describes along this route a woman in white searches for her groom. Both died on their wedding night in the early 1900s while driving the 13 curves. And it's been put in place by the New York Folklore Society.
Oh, I see. Yeah, like they don't have anything to gain from this legend. I don't trust them.
What do you, I mean, what do you think about this? Because it seems to be such a common story. Do you think that it exists or is just one of those tales that's become part of American folklore?
Well, I think it represents. I think it's just one of those tales that really hits all the points for people. You have the tragedy, and then people would assume that there would be some intense longing from this bride for her groom because they never got to, even consummate their marriage, possibly, right? So their souls are stuck here together now because they'd been, you know, linked by the state of New York.
They've been linked, huh?
Yeah, matrimized together, or what's the word? Yeah,
Matrimized?
yeah. They were in love. It's their
Okay.
soulmate.
Okay.
Yeah, and yeah, I just think it just represents what we view as just a very good example of something that would be extra tragic and involving deep love, and that would explain why she can't let go. And she's still looking for a groom. Now, does she try to lead people astray into deadly curves? Now that would be stepping it up a notch,
Perhaps.
like a ghostly siren.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's a ghost I can get down with.
the sirens would get me too, and I could see sirens working on sailors, right? Back in the day, these dudes they've been out there for months, right? Mostly male
They're horny.
ships. They're horny. They have scurvy. They need some fucking fruit in their life, right? Some vitamin C. And then there's these hot chicks singing beautifully over there on that dangerous shoal of rocks. Why would you not go over there and check it out?
Yeah.
There you go.
They didn't have a little AM FM transistor radio, right?
No, they hadn't even heard music. Except that one guy who thinks he can sing, but he's really not that good. And then they threw
They
him
didn't even have a harmonica on board.
No.
They couldn't even sing the blues. They had to listen to that old guy sing some sea shanties.
He was like, whoa, whoa. They've heard enough of that shit.
Yes.
Right?
Right.
They're like, if he does that one more fucking time, I swear.
All right, Dylan. One of the most haunted houses in New York City is located on 14 West 10th Street. It is a brownstone nicknamed the House of Death.
Oh, gosh.
It is said to be haunted by at least 22 ghosts.
Wow.
The brownstone was also once home to author Mark Twain, and his ghost is said to still wander through the stairwell of the home. But Dylan, there is a more recent tragedy that happened at the House of Death.
Okay. What is this?
A true crime story. One of New York's most horrific true crime stories. On November 2nd of 1987, a woman named Hedda Nussbaum called 911 and reported that her daughter Lisa had choked on her food and vomited. She also told the 911 dispatcher that her daughter had been falling down a lot lately on her roller skates. And the falling down story seemed to try to cover up the fact that this child had several bruises on her body.
Oh, my gosh.
Now, when first responders get to the apartment, they find this little girl unconscious. The police found 16-month-old Mitchell, her brother, chained to his crib, laying in urine and feces, but the child was otherwise unharmed. The apartment was disgusting and dirty. They said it was basically these people were living in squalor.
Yeah. When they use the word squalor, I mean, we're talking, this is a couple of steps beyond just dirty or unkept, right? This is filthy, nasty, hasn't been cleaned in quite some time. Oh, my gosh.
They also found $25,000 cash in the apartment, along with a lot of cocaine and other drugs. There were also bloodstains found all throughout the apartment, and the kitchen sink was somehow ripped off the wall.
Okay, this sounds like a really horrible place for these kids to be.
Hedda showed signs that she had been beaten. Joel Steinberg and Hedda Nussbaum were both arrested on charges of child abuse because Lisa died in the hospital on November 4th. So just several days after this 911 call happened. Hedda started out as a co-defendant, but it was later decided that years of abuse that she had suffered had made her incompetent to help her daughter, who was also being abused.
And I mean, that can happen. I
She
mean, if it's been going on for such a long time, you don't even know what's normal anymore. I mean, it's hard to understand, but I mean, I guess it makes sense.
she became a witness, and her version of what happened to Lisa is heartbreaking. And I should also mention, Dylan, Joel Steinberg is an attorney.
Okay.
He was a criminal defense attorney who was 46 years old at the time, and he and Hedda were considered like common law married. They had been together over 10 years. She was 45 years old, and she had been a pretty well-known children's book editor, but had left her career behind because of the abuse she was enduring.
My gosh.
So they lived together in this apartment in Greenwich Village, in this brownstone, and they had illegally adopted 2 children, the 6-year-old little girl, Lisa, and a 16-month-old boy named Mitchell. They're both highly educated, and they seem like they're just a normal upper-middle-class couple with these 2 cute kids, but they're hiding this nasty secret of abuse. I mean, it's just terrible what's
Right.
happening behind closed doors.
Yeah, it's the same old song and dance. Everybody thinks it's something, they're fine, they're perfect, or whatever family, and it turns out, the children probably hate to even go home and get behind these closed doors, because that's when the real stuff comes out.
Now, according to Hedda, on November 1st, Joel was going out for dinner and partying with friends, and little Lisa wanted to go with him, but he didn't want to bring her, and he ended up hitting her in the head with a rubber-headed hammer.
Okay.
Hedda said Lisa was already unconscious when Joel Steinberg left the apartment, but instead of calling 911 then, she sat in this filthy apartment for hours with the baby, the 18-month-old baby Mitchell, and this little girl, Lisa, who was at this time fatally injured. Hedda claimed that she was waiting for Steinberg to come home because she believed that he would be able to wake up the little girl.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, what do you think about her being swapped from co-defendant to witness and basically said that she's because of the abuse she's endured, she's not responsible for her actions during this? What do you think about that?
That's some bullshit.
I mean, I know that
I don't.
I know that there's generational abuse. I
I'm
know
not
all that.
subscribing to this narrative.
I'm sorry. I don't know. Even if I was abused, and you got to imagine the little girl. Both of them are not acting normal. The one's fatally injured, as it turns out. So she's definitely probably non-responsive. I mean, who knows?
Well, bitch, nothing is stopping you from cleaning your house.
Well, nothing's stopping you from calling 911 because your kid is going to die while you watch.
Well, this is the thing, is that nothing is stopping this woman from cleaning this house, for caring for these children. Why is this 18-month-old covered in urine and his own feces chained to a crib?
Nah,
I mean, that's why I'm just like, I
Yeah.
don't buy this shit.
Yeah, I'm with you. Fuck her, for real.
Yeah.
And you wouldn't even, if you saw a dog being treated like that kid's being treated, people would lose their mind. And it's it's her kid. So yeah,
That
I'm
she's
sorry.
illegally adopted. I mean, I'm sorry, but this doesn't add up for me.
It doesn't add up for
Now-
me. It's sadistic.
When Joel finally got home, the couple still didn't call 911. Instead, they decided to freebase some cocaine,
Yeah.
which I learned, Dylan, is heating the cocaine and inhaling the vapors. And Jennifer reminded us that that's what Richard Pryor did when he set himself on fire.
It is. He was enjoying the freebase. And
So they thought they should do some cocaine about it so they could relate better about what was happening. So again, I don't buy this woman's story.
So you know what? When she said that dumb shit right there, a big hand, a comically large hand should have come out from the side frame and smacked the shit taste out of her mouth and say, "Don't even say that."
Yeah,
dumb
like in
shit."
that new Jackass movie
Yes.
when that giant hand
Yes.
smacks the shit out of Machine Gun Kelly.
Exactly
Yeah,
like that.
I feel like a big hand just needs to smack her. So, I mean, I don't even know what that means. How is getting high going to help them understand the fact that he's killed this child?
Your house is
I mean, come on.
it's disgusting. It's just terrible. But you got a bunch of cocaine, So, you got that going for you. Whatever. And you want to get high. And so, because you know why they didn't call anybody or do anything, because this was the cycle of abuse these children have endured many times. And she never helps either. And she'll never tell on him, right? And she'll never call the police. She'll never reach out for help because she don't want him to get in trouble. Fuck her and him.
Well, she finally did call 911, but again, she's telling these lies about the little girl falling
It's
down
too
on
late.
roller skates.
It's
and
fucking too
choking.
late.
So again, Lisa's only 6 years old, and her teachers would later say that she came to school often with bruises and missing chunks of hair. When they would ask about it, Lisa would say her little brother had hit her or that he had pulled her hair out.
Yeah.
And teachers also said through all of this abuse, Lisa was a very smart, friendly little girl and just a sweet little baby. And none of the teachers ever filed a report about Lisa being abused because none of them thought she was. She always had a story about what had happened.
Yeah, and she's already been, taught to lie about the abuse. So you know what I mean. Probably threatened in some form or fashion, and she's doing it so naturally that the teachers are believing her story that it was another kid or her brother or whatever, and that's very sad. And I'm sure more than one of those teachers wish they had caught it and realized what was happening.
Hedda Nussbaum was sent to a psychiatric hospital, and Joel Steinberg was charged with second-degree murder and first-degree manslaughter. So it kind of came out that during their relationship, Nussbaum had been abused for years. She had suffered 9 broken ribs, her jaw had been broken, and her nose had been broken. So in exchange for her testimony against Steinberg, they didn't prosecute her at all for Lisa's death. So it seems to me that the prosecutors were willing to make a deal with her, even though I think she should have been charged.
In some form or fashion, I think there's at the very least I don't know, very least severe negligence or something. I don't know. I don't think you let her all the way off the hook, but maybe they know something about the situation we don't.
Steinberg was convicted by jury of the lesser charge of that first-degree manslaughter and was given the maximum sentence at the time, which was 8 to 25 years in prison. He went before the parole board twice and was denied both times. He always refused to express any remorse for killing Lisa, which is probably why he was denied parole those 2 times. But under New York State's good time law, he was finally paroled on June 30th of 2004. So when he was paroled, Hedda Nussbaum vowed to leave New York State because she was so terrified of this man. As of 2017, she was living in an unknown state under a different identity.
Well, good. Let's hope at least she's safe.
And as of that time, Steinberg was still living in Harlem, New York City, still living in New York City, but in the Harlem section. And he's been disbarred from ever practicing law again. And so he's in his 80s now.
Well, he's still a piece of shit. He's just an old piece of shit.
There is a book called What Lisa Knew by a woman named Joyce Johnson, if you would like to find out more about this case. But yeah, this house of death was the site of this vicious murder
and continued abuse.
But
Wow.
also is haunted by 22 more ghosts, allegedly.
Well, I've got to imagine that there is definitely some type of dark energy there just from the trauma that's happened, even just from these poor children's case. And that's too good, man. Somebody should have beat them in the fucking head. Sorry.
In Washington Heights, there is the Morris Jumel Mansion. It is said to have an eclectic collection of ghosts, including a talking grandfather clock.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
And a soldier who steps out of a painting, much like in a Harry Potter book.
It's like the Beast's house, all this stuff talked, right?
So the woman who lived there, Eliza Jumel, was rumored to have murdered her first husband. And then she died after divorcing her second husband, former Vice President Aaron Burr.
Huh. Well, there you go.
So there was a whole field trip of school children that witnessed Eliza Jumel dressed in a violet-colored gown. She appeared and told them all to be quiet.
Oh, my gosh.
Yes. And she suffered from dementia in real life, and people who have reported seeing her ghosts say she almost appears delusional.
Or like she might be confused or something.
Yes, when she shows up.
Ah, well, that's how you know it's her ghost, right?
Now, Dylan, what would you do if a grandfather clock just started talking to you? Are you going to be okay with that?
No. No, that would totally freak me out. And if a confused ghost, well, I think that would almost be scarier than a rather, straightforward and accurate or, sharp ghost. So
Oh,
a ghost who knew what their intentions were, had clear thoughts. Yeah, a confused ghost sounds scary, right? 'Cause he's just going around, he's like, oh, boo, forgetting like where he's at and shit.
yes.
Yeah. Okay. So how would you react?
Yeah, I'm not going to be okay with a talking grandfather clock. A cuckoo clock, maybe.
I was going to say, is it just because it's this inanimate object talking, or is it the fact it's a grandfather clock?
I think any inanimate object that's speaking to me,
Okay.
whether it's a clock or a picture on the wall or like a camera, a blender, my food processor starts cussing me out, like I'm not going to be okay with that.
Okay, me
Okay,
neither.
that's terrifying.
Not doing it.
Just like if an appliance starts working and I realize it isn't even plugged in, that's not okay.
No, I'm leaving the house. I'm done. I'm moving. I'm not even going to take any of my shit with me. I'm just leaving. Just going to hit the sidewalk and keep walking.
Okay, Dylan. So we are going to talk about one of the urban legends in New York. Of course, urban legends have always been pretty popular, and typically they're just a bit of good fun to spread around. They kind of give us each a good scare and maybe sometimes teach us a moral lesson or something.
Yeah, I was
right?
going to say that's a key component often.
Or they keep people away from a specific location. I mean, I think about things like Bloody Mary, the Mothman, who seems to be stealing catalytic converters all over Point Pleasant, West Virginia.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I've seen people with shirts that say the Mothman stole their catalytic converter, so it must be true. So in New York, things aren't so different. All cultures seem to have their own story to tell. And one of the stories that began cropping up, no pun intended, around the 1970s was stories of a supposed killer named Cropsey, specifically in the Staten Island area. It's a tragic legend, one describing a man who, after the death of his son, escaped a mental health hospital and kidnapped several young children. Oh, and some of the stories say he had a hook for a hand.
Oh, no. Not the hook hand.
Yes.
Cropsey?
Cropsey.
That sounds scary.
There's even a documentary about Cropsey.
See, I felt like I'd seen that before.
Yes. And they kind of get to the bottom of the Cropsey legend. It's really interesting. If you haven't checked out the Cropsey documentary, I say watch it. So some of the stories describe Cropsey as having scars like from burns, almost Freddy Krueger-like
Right?
scars. Others say his crimes were only on Staten Island. Other accounts are like, oh no, they were all over the state. And of course, a lot of parents use the story to prevent their kids from getting into trouble. He was also a major fascination at summer camps. Kids all over New York heard the story of Cropsey. So let's talk about the legend of Cropsey.
So would they be like, don't eat all them popsicles, old Cropsey's going to get you? They do stuff like that, you reckon?
Yes.
You better go up there and wash your hair with shampoo, or old Cropsey's going to get you.
So the real Cropsey story is based on Andre Rand, who was born on March 11th, 1944, and he worked as a custodian at the Willowbrook State School in the Staten Island area. Now, if you don't know about the Willowbrook State School, it has a very bad history. Very bad history.
I want to say I've heard that name of that the name of that school for some reason.
It was an institution that was so terrible, it shocked a nation into changing its laws.
And this is back in the day when they were all basically terrible. But this was shockingly terrible. The worst thing people had heard. Is that right?
Yeah, so what happened was there was this large facility on Staten Island, 375 acres of land. And after World War II ended, some thought that Willowbrook should be used to care for disabled veterans. But New York Governor Thomas Dewey argued that there were thousands of children in the state who were, quote, mentally and physically defective and feeble minded, who can never become members of society and needed to be cared for with, quote, a high degree of tenderness and affection. Now, on this matter, this institution would ultimately fail. It would become known in the decades following, Willowbrook, synonymous for injustice, moral abhorrence, and failures of the state psychiatric system.
Man, I guess, back then, it was just like people put disabled people there, whoever, just, and I'm sure they had trouble caring for them at home and stuff, especially back then. Whole lot less ideas on as far as access goes, and things to help people care for someone like that. But it's like they would just stick them in a place like this and just leave them there, and maybe not even visit often. Or you had cases of husbands wanting to damn cheat on their wives, so they say they're crazy and sign them into a mental hospital, shit like that, and they're basically a prisoner being tortured.
Now this is a place specifically for children.
Okay.
So this state school opened in October of 1947, and at first they only had 20 mentally disabled patients from upstate institutions. But in a short time, Willowbrook became overfilled and understaffed, which we've heard time and time again when we've discussed asylums and these kinds of places.
Every single one.
By 1955, it had reached its full capacity of around 4,000 occupants. Now, around that time, hepatitis infections ran rampant among patients and staff. And only a short time after that, in 1960, there was an outbreak of measles that killed, in the upwards of 60 patients. But this is not even like conveying some of the wretched conditions these patients lived under. Despite its name as a school, there was barely any kind of educational structure at Willowbrook. When teaching did happen, it was only for like a handful of cooperative students for maybe 2 hours a day. Most of the Willowbrook experience was defined by constant neglect. Again, overstressed, underfunded staff. And most of them probably not even qualified to be working there.
No.
Like literally just hiring anybody off the street. So you had, in some buildings, the mentally disabled huddled in rooms, moaning, fidgeting, just sort of meandering. They didn't have much care or resources. Many of these children went naked. And again, they have no supervision. Others sat drenched in their own urine and feces. Urine and feces were smeared on the walls. If they had it on their clothing, it went for like days and days and days, maybe even weeks without being changed because they didn't have other clothes to put them in and they were not doing laundry regularly. Sexual and physical abuse at the hands of fellow patients and the staff was very common, as was the spread of diseases.
Now, think about that. 4,000 patients, right? That's a lot of people. Just the simple day-to-day logistics of feeding, medicating, changing, caring for, checking on those people with any kind of even close to an adequate amount would take a staff of hundreds, wouldn't you think?
Yes.
And let alone keeping the grounds up. And this probably has some, big old-timey boiler heating all these big buildings.
375 acres.
Yeah. Yeah. So, and I doubt they probably didn't have a fifth or sixth of the staff they actually needed, and there's not properly funded. So they're basically just locking them, and it sounds like in these, big dorm style rooms with nothing, no beds, no privacy, no care, nothing but just.
They're just naked,
and cold,
wandering around cold,
unfed, unmedicated, abused, attacked by other patients, staff. We know for a fact, we've talked about this before, that sadists would fucking congregate or try like hell to get in a job like this because they knew behind those locked doors they were literally in full control of these people. There's really no oversight. And that's a perfect job for some sick person like that.
Well, by 1969, Willowbrook, designated for the capacity of the 4,000 patients, reached its peak of 6,200
Oh
patients.
my God.
It was considered the largest mental institution in the United States, but was also host to some of the country's most deplorable living conditions. The first the first that the American public heard of Willowbrook's horrors was in a speech made by Robert Kennedy, who spoke on systematic failures in mental health care. And he described visiting the state institutions and said, particularly Willowbrook, was a situation that bordered on a snake pit.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like a good description of what's happening there.
Yet, even though he made this speech in 1969, it took 7 more years for the true story of Willowbrook to break. And that's when 2 young journalists, a print reporter named Jane Curtin and an ambitious 29-year-old local news reporter named Geraldo Rivera.
Oh, damn,
Yeah,
Gerardo.
Geraldo broke the story on
Yeah,
Willowbrook.
you know, people you can like them or not like them, politics or whatever. Geraldo was a damn.
Back in the day,
He was an investigative journalist. He was. I mean, he was good.
dude, I like to watch the Geraldo show back in the day.
Yeah.
So he was tipped off, and they were given a key by a disgruntled staff member. Rivera snuck into Building 6 with a cameraman. They got quick evidence of this overpopulated and squalid facility, which at the time had about 5,400 patients. This news coverage, the scenes from Willowbrook were shocking. The news story, which appeared on WABC TV, was watched by millions, and viewers saw scores of mentally disabled patients huddled in these rooms, naked. They were not allowed to be outside. Middle-aged patients slept on seats. Others crouched and kind of rocked back and forth on the floor. Some child patients, again, went without clothing. The neglect was so significant that it showed 60% of the patient population were not toilet trained and 64% were incapable of feeding themselves. So many of these people were like malnourished and on the verge of starvation because they didn't have a staff member to help assist with their feeding needs.
How can anyone that does work there? How could you watch people exist in this? Even if you personally couldn't change everything, I mean, how could you just keep even coming and taking part of this or not telling someone else what you're seeing? How can you just stand by and, make sure you eat every day and, you got all your stuff done and just watch people treated like this? I don't get it.
In this expose, Rivera interviewed a 21-year-old patient with cerebral palsy named Bernard Carabello and another 18-year-old resident of Willowbrook who had a very sharp intellect, though he did suffer some difficulty speaking and moving as quickly as others. And he eloquently explained the environment. He called it a disgrace. He said, quote, "I got beaten with sticks, belt buckles. I got my head kicked into the wall by staff. Most of the kids sat in the day room naked with no clothes on. There was a lot of sexual abuse going on from staff to residents also." And at this point, this gentleman, Carabello, is now in his late 60s, and he was able to retire from a state job in Manhattan after being released from this terrible place.
Well, damn, that's one of the saddest stories I've ever heard.
Yeah, it was really, really terrible. And so around 2 months after this TV special, residents of Staten Island filed a class action lawsuit against Willowbrook, and it would mark the beginning of the end for this institution.
Well, yeah, it sounds like it doesn't need to be operated. I mean, it can't be allowed to continue.
So back to our story. Andre Rand, the real Cropsey, worked as a custodian at the Willowbrook State School on Staten Island. In 1983, for no reason in particular, Rand took a school bus full of 11 children from a New York City YMCA out to New Jersey's Newark Liberty International Airport. Now, thankfully, no one was harmed, but he was arrested and given a 10-month sentence. And people around knew he was completely untrustworthy in the area, but they didn't know exactly what he was capable of. He often hung around kids, and was seen taking walks with them or taking them out to diners to eat. There were several instances where children would go missing and Rand would be the last person spotted with them. But nothing would come of it until 1987 with the disappearance of 12-year-old Jennifer Schweiger. Later on in 1988, the custodian would be charged with the kidnapping and first-degree murder of the child, having been the last person seen with her. Rand is simultaneously associated with the disappearances of 4 others. Alice Peria, Holly Ann Hughes, Tyhees Jackson, and Hank Gafforio, but only given one additional criminal charge for this kidnapping of Hughes. But the jury was never able to convict him on a murder charge, but they did get him on kidnapping charges. So he won't be eligible for parole until 2037, which would make him 93 years old if he actually gets released from prison.
No. I mean, you think he's going to do anything positive for that busload of kids he's trying to take to the freaking airport? What was he even doing?
Yeah, I know. So the real story of Cropsey stems from this Andre Rand case.
So he literally took a bunch of kids.
Yeah.
Stole a bunch of kids, just like Cropsey.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I mean, I could see a scary, dark story coming out of us, a real life situation like that.
Also, after they closed the Willowbrook State School down on Staten Island, it kind of became one of those places where, teenagers would go to party. There was a lot of graffiti, that kind of stuff. And Andre Rand occasionally lived in campsites near the facility. So when they finally arrested him for this kidnapping of Jennifer Schweiger, they were able to find just some very strange items around his campsite, as well. Like
really?
Children's underwear and kind of thing.
Oh, my God.
He was a fucking weirdo. Now, the Cropsey documentary, it came out in 2009, and it was written and directed by Joshua Zeman and Barbara Branacchio.
I bet you said that exactly right.
But it's really interesting. You should check it out. So that's been kind of an interesting sort of local, lure for folks in New York. Another disturbing example of what went on in psych wards and provides a very chilling experiences for folks who want to go check it out is the Kings Park Psychiatric Facility, which is on Long Island. Now, this facility ran from 1885 to 1996, and the remaining patients were eventually transferred to a new clinic. But it has been abandoned since and has become one of New York's spookiest spots. A lot of ghost hunters have gone there.
Well,
It's very creepy.
I think all asylums are good for that. Definitely got some dark energy, lots of misery, and I think that often imprints on places when there's just intense misery by a large number of people. And I mean, how could those places sound like hell on earth? I mean, they truly do. And you're not even, we've covered it before, but the if you had to read the head doctor or the resident doctor, whoever's like basically over, what is that called?
Like the chief of staff?
Yeah. I mean, he can literally do anything.
Or like the director?
Yeah, like the head doctor. Let's just call him that.
Okay.
Because
when you first said the head doctor, I was like, do you mean like a psychiatrist?
Oh, no. The lead doctor, the one in charge. I'm sorry, you say you have a problem with your arm? Well, I'm a head doctor.
Exactly.
Oh.
He's here all week, folks.
They just try crazy shit that has absolutely no, has not been tested or even thought out. They're just like, well, maybe if we just pull people's fucking teeth, I think there's evil spirits in teeth or whatever. And you have healthy people come in there who maybe their family is not abandoning them. They just want to get them some help. And the first thing we do, an 18-year-old or something, pull their fucking
Reminds
teeth.
me of the show The Nick.
Yeah,
about the Knickerbocker Hospital.
Yes.
One of the doctor's wives loses her baby.
Yes.
And she becomes very depressed, right? Because it's a terrible situation. Who wouldn't be depressed, right?
She has like intense
postpartum depression and
Yes.
then just depression after the loss of the child. And she's sent to a hospital and they pull all of this woman's teeth. And she's like a beautiful, young, healthy woman. And they take all of her teeth.
Pull all her healthy teeth out. I'm talking about we're helping you. Oh my God.
Yeah.
Yeah, it doesn't
Which, I
work.
mean, obviously it's a fictional account,
But
but that
that's
happens all the time
yeah. We during our asylum series, you talked about a doctor that was he thought that was a treatment.
because the teeth are haunted.
Yeah.
The teeth are bad.
Well, I mean, just think about it. If you was a evil spirit or some kind of brain, whatever goblin, where would you hide? In the fucking teeth, dude. Why not?
Well, I think you've got one hiding in your intestines.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
Another asylum that is quite famous in New York is the Rolling Hills Asylum. In days gone by, Dylan, or bygone, or whatever you want to say, a bygone era, it was called the Genesee County Poor Farm.
What the hell?
Now, a poorhouse, as these places were called back in the day, were often a place that housed orphan children, maybe very, very poor families, the destitute elderly, physically and mentally handicapped folks, sometimes even criminals. These institutions were situated on the grounds of a poor farm on which the able bodied residents were required to work. And this was a very common practice in the United States in the 19th and early 20th centuries.
Right.
Now, a poorhouse, which sometimes is referred to as an almshouse or an asylum, was usually a government run facility for the support and housing of dependent or needy persons, right? Typically, like, would be run by a local government, like a county or a municipality. And they were, kind of widespread all over the United States before the Social Security program came into effect in the 1930s.
Okay, so this is just literally a catch-all for anyone who's either down and out or, have some kind of disabilities, can't work and make money for themselves, even orphans. Wow, all mixed together in one of these places.
Right. So in 1826, the Genesee County Board of Supervisors met in Bethany, New York for the purpose of establishing this county poorhouse. They chose a brick building that had originally been a stagecoach tavern, which was located on the corner of Bethany Center Road and Raymond Road. So it's kind of at the geographical center of the county, although Wyoming County wasn't actually established until 1841. But for all intents and purposes, it's the county poorhouse.
So it's still what became in the center of what became the county.
Yeah. So folks who were eligible for assistance were, oh, Dylan, you, a habitual drunkard,
Ah, yes.
lunatics, state paupers,
Ah, the damn paupers.
or vagrants.
Yeah, I was wondering about the indigent.
Yeah. So by lunatics, that's anyone who has a disease, grief, or accident, lost the use of reason, or from old age, sickness, or weakness so weak of mind they are incapable of governing or managing their affairs.
Wow, I know a lot of people like that.
You do?
Yeah. Yeah, I see them in the store every day, every time I go there.
So residents were referred to as inmates, no matter why they were housed there. Like, you could just be a sick person and they called you an inmate.
Sick, criminal, orphan, you're all inmates.
Yeah. So those who were physically able-bodied were supposed to work the farm, and they also built and made wares to sell to kind of offset some of the living expenses. They raised hogs, Holstein cattle, draft horses, chickens, ducks. Of course, they had vegetable and fruit crops. They canned jams and jellies. They sold meats as well that they raised.
Yeah, a lot of these people were intended and needed to be self-sufficient as possible. Grow as much fruits and vegetables, raise and butcher your own cow meat, but just to support, feed everybody there. And a lot of the prisons were designed like that too.
They even had a bakery on site and a wood shop where coffins were made, and they were able to sell those to local mortuaries. There are no records about a cemetery, so they think that the burying grounds were just sort of all around this place.
So there's none marked, and they think they just put them wherever.
Yes. So, I think, they're trying to put together sort of a map or, like a plot area where they think the cemetery might be, but there's just bodies buried everywhere here. So at this point, it is no longer in operation, but is considered to be incredibly haunted.
And if any place can be, I'm sure it would be that place.
They do ghost hunts. They offer guided tours. They do movie nights. Sometimes they have celebrity events and that kind of thing there.
That's kind of weird.
It's a little strange, huh?
Well, I looked this one up. This is a very strange, creepy looking building, the way it's set up and everything, right?
It's strange. Yeah. There have been some of those famous ghost shows that have toured this area.
Oh, wait, you mean the ones where they get evidence of paranormal activity almost every episode?
Yeah.
Yeah, man, those guys are good.
Ghost Adventures, they have been there. They have found in their study that there is a diverse mixture of tragic cases and dark personalities in this asylum.
That's their assessment.
That is their assessment.
Nice.
Yeah, but it is open to the public, so it would be kind of cool. They have documented over 1,700 deaths, and then, of course, there are hundreds that have not been recorded there. And so those bodies are just sort of buried around.
So likely thousands of people died there.
Yeah.
Okay, we need to open one of these back up. Now, hear me out. We're going to open one up. We'll open this one, okay? Right? What was the name of this one?
Rolling Hills Asylum.
Rolling Hills. That's perfect. Rolling Hills Asylum is going to be reopened in 2025, and we are going to do our best to historically represent the exact horrid conditions these unfortunate souls had to exist in. And this is where we're going to put the pedophiles and the rapists. I know you knew I was going there. And that's where we're going.
I didn't know that's where you're going, but
we're going to put them there. This is only a good reason to bring a house of horrors like this back. And we're going to make them live in this shithole.
Oh, but the bleeding hearts would be
and we're going
no, this is an atrocity. We can't do this to.
Well, and we'll just
we can't do this to the minor attracted persons.
We'll just accuse them of being heretics, right? And we'll throw them in there with them. We'll be at the Catholic Church, bro. You don't agree with me? I'm gonna burn you. Yeah, you don't like that? If you're an anti-Baptist, yeah, I'm gonna drown you. We're gonna give you what the Catholic Church would lovingly and funnily call the third baptism, right?
You're gonna drive all the snakes out of Ireland?
Because the anti-Baptists felt you could not give yourself over to the Lord as a child, right? So their parents often would baptize them as children, but as an adult, they would rededicate themselves to God. That's their second baptism.
Okay, well,
and the Catholic
can
Church,
we move on to we'll talk about one more ghost story because you're rambling now. About
they would give them their third one by drowning them.
That you've lost me, and you've lost the listeners, and we don't care. Okay, so there are a few historical buildings that still remain in the United States, and one of those very interesting spots, Dylan, is an imposing castle located about an hour away from the city by car. And I'm talking about Bannerman's Island. It's located in the middle of the waters of the famous Hudson River, and it's a very interesting spot, Dylan.
You say it's Bannerman Island?
Bannerman's Island. Because
Island.
there is a space that looks like a castle. Bannerman's Castle. Francis Bannerman VI, who was the owner of the island, bought it in 1901. He was a Scottish immigrant who came to America in the mid-1850s. So when the Civil War ended, his family company repurchased military surplus and resorted to this island for storage in what is today this imposing castle.
Man, that place looks...
That in the past was used to store more than 30 million leftover cartridges and ammunition.
That place looks so cool. I mean,
right?
It's in a kind of a ruined state, but it's pretty groovy.
Well, Bannerman himself designed the building. He gave the blueprints to the builders. The amount of products that they kept in stock in the first building was so large that they had to erect another castle. It was like a smaller scale and was at the top of the island. It's just very strange. So a lot of folks were like, well, why did he design it to look like a castle?
Well, maybe you just thought it was cool.
Well, that's exactly why, Dylan.
Oh,
Because in this golden era, tycoons were celebrities. And he focused on using this castle, this huge brick, castle for his business that was visible from the shore to like attract attention.
oh, okay. Well, that's
Yeah.
a pretty good idea.
So in 1918, after he died, the construction of the castle was paused. And a couple of years later, 2 tons of explosives blew up and destroyed part of the complex.
Yeah, people from out of town be like, "What in the hell's out there on that island?" People like, "Oh, it's the button factory."
Now, the island, according to Native American tradition, is inhabited by hostile spirits. It is true that history could indicate that the island situation is more than a matter of sheer bad luck. So, a lot of folks think that vengeful spirits caused it to decline and fall.
Oh,
And, storing ammunition there, probably not the best thing you could do. Because the explosion, they think, was caused by lightning that struck the flagpoles.
yeah. Maybe you shouldn't have the flag, the big metal pole sticking up out of the ammunition dump. Okay, not good.
But that's not the worst thing that happened. In 1950, a cargo ship, the Polapel, was in the middle of a huge storm on the Hudson River. It crashed on the island during the height of the storm, exploding on impact. The blast caused even more damage to the building, and the ill-fated boat gave the island its modern name. Although many still call it Bannerman's Island, a lot of folks call it Polapel Island.
Huh, wow.
But bad times for the family had just begun. So at that time, new legislation put obstacles to their business in place. And later, the ferry connecting the island to the mainland sank. And after that time, the island came to be uninhabited. Later in 1969, a fire destroyed the remains of the buildings, leaving them without ceilings or floors. And since then, the river has almost completely destroyed the walls of the port, leaving only the turrets and bridges surrounded by water. And then, of course, the weather has made it lose its white paint, and there's been a lot of vandalism, and vegetation has slowly sort of taken over and started to deteriorate what's left of the walls.
Man, it's amazing. After humans, nature will always take back over. No matter how advanced we think our civilization has become or anything like that, without maintenance, without maintaining our footprint, it would all just go back to the animals and vines.
So, Dylan, there is a real Sleepy Hollow in New York,
Really,
and someone's dog is barking like crazy outside the house.
y'all let that dog in. It's cold.
So before Washington Irving penned the terrifying persona of the Headless Horseman, chances are he found inspiration in the form of the Headless Hessian, a Revolutionary War character thought to haunt Westchester County.
The headless Hessian.
Mm-hmm. Now, the Hessian was rumored to be a terror attacking unsuspecting locals in the early days of the Hudson Valley.
Now I've got to say the Legend of Sleepy Hollow, and there's always been kids versions and stuff, and there's been some kind of darker versions too. But as a kid, that one kind of got me. That scared me. What about you?
Yeah, it's very creepy.
I remember even there's one of the older animated movies, and it's like he throws his flaming pumpkin head and shit at Ichabod, bro.
Well, yeah. Well, just
No.
the thought of a headless horseman is terrifying.
Yeah.
And not that it was a headless horseman, but growing up, my great grandmother always told me a story about Main Street, which we live a block away from Main Street, right? And when she was growing up in Haywood County as a young girl, the doctor made house calls, and his name was Doc Allen. And she talked about, he would come to their house at 2 a.m. if he had to, and he rode a horse, and he would barter. Like if you didn't have money for the doctor, you give him like a couple chickens or some eggs or whatever. But she said one night he was making a house call to their house. Now I don't know why, but it was middle of the night, whatever. He gets up there. She said he was terrified, white as a ghost, babbling about how while he was riding his horse down Main Street, which at the time, of course, was like a dirt road, that something by the cemetery, there's Green Hill Historic Cemetery off Main Street. That right past that area, something jumped on the back of his horse
What?
and like grabbed hold of him and like rode about a mile down and then jumped off. And he was too scared to like turn around and see what it was. But he said it wasn't like a human person.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. And he was
No.
totally freaked out and scared. And so she's always told me that story. And even though it wasn't a headless horseman, I can only think it was like some headless creature jumping on the back of this horse or something.
And he's too terrified to stop or turn around. So you just, you're embraced by this creature, by this specter of sorts.
It's creepy,
Until it
huh?
decides to let you go.
Ugh.
Yeah, maybe it just needed a ride, dude.
So this headless Hessian that turned into the headless horseman, it was like Revolutionary War story. And folks would write about how like a sober citizen would be returning from a saloon with a pitcher of beer,
A sober citizen.
expecting to drink in the bosom of his family, and was dragged upon the bridge by invisible hands, though it was clear moonlight, and flung over the high parapet into the water of the Pocantico River, where he swam for some time
Look,
until he was rescued by neighbors.
I'm going to guess this guy might not have been sober. Okay? And you can get to-go pitchers of beer back then?
I
And take it all the way
guess.
back home?
Fuck yeah.
So I guess that was their, what do they call that, a flight? No, they call that a grog. What is it? It was their...
A growler?
A growler. That's it.
A
grog.
grog?
A grog. A grog of beer.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that was the original growler. And I was also realizing that was the first Uber ride he unwittingly gave the ghost.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, you just need to go a couple blocks and meet his boys down there at Wild Wings. All right, man. I'm
You're
starting
goofy.
to get scared. Oh my god, why are you so scary?
I want to go to the real Sleepy Hollow.
I don't know. Like I said, that one kind of messed me up when I was a kid. So I think I might set that one out.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Oh, man. Okay.
Oh, look, you're happy now. You're really gonna go.
Dylan, we could probably go on for like another 2 hours about haunted New York places. There are a lot of haunted hotels. The Dakota, supposedly the ghost of John Lennon,
Well, there's a lot
haunts
of
the Dakota. The infamous Chelsea Hotel in New York City,
oh my gosh.
haunted by many a famous person.
Yeah, New York has a lot of history, honestly.
Yeah, I mean, just in New York City, there's a ton of ghost stories. But when you get out into other parts, there's so much ghost activity, it seems.
I mean, it's like everybody just run around skirt,
Yeah.
right?
Run around skirt, yeah.
Yeah, and so there was some nice haunted stories there. It makes me want to. I can't wait till we get to our listener stories.
Oh,
episode.
yeah, I know. We're going to get to that soon.
And but yeah, and we'll be continuing this week with another true crime tale from New York because that's where we be at right now.
Yeah.
And I can't wait. And thank you for that, honey.
You're welcome.
Yeah,
Okay.
and I'll see you next time.
Bye.